Hello everyone, Torvald here, and I have another one of my Great Weapons lesson videos for you. This one is kind of a follow-up to my previous videos, questions that came up on something I only touched on briefly in them, so I'm going to expand on it now. First of all, let me start with my standard disclaimer. I am not a believer in the one true way of doing anything. This is my way. Take whatever works for you and keep it. Whatever doesn't work for you, toss it. Okay, disclaimer out of the way. What I'm going to be talking about is grip and changing hands or changing your grip position during combat. Now, there isn't going to be a lot in the way of demonstration in this video because honestly it really doesn't need it. Secondly, I'm dealing with an arm injury and I'm kind of restricted in what I'm allowed to do and how much weight I'm allowed to lift. So I do have, however, my 6-foot cutting spear here to at least use as a visual prop for some of this. So what we're going to be talking about again is we're talking about grip and changing hand position during combat. Now this is one thing about SCA combat that I think has been influenced more by martial arts movies from Hollywood, Hong Kong, and so on than virtually any other aspect of what we do. In my Great Weapons class, you will at times hear me make a Jackie Chan or Daffy Duck reference because, of course, Jackie Chan, very famous martial artist, and in most martial arts movies, you do see anytime there is any type of a pole or spear or naginata, some type of pole weapon, there is all sorts of flipping and twisting and spinning going around, wrapping around their neck or around their waist, windmilling in front of them. And then, of course, we all, I know, are familiar with the Daffy Duck Robin Hood cartoon with the ha-ha-ho, dodge, spin, parry, thrust, thwack. And I gotta tell you, sorry guys, 99% of you are gonna look like Daffy Duck as opposed to Jackie Chan. The reality is that when it comes to grip, I touched on this in my previous videos, that I personally tend to favor a left-handed grip, which is my right hand is leading, my left hand is trailing, and I'm fighting with the weapon on the left side of my body. And predominantly I'm doing it this way because most of my opponents are right-handed. Therefore, most of their attacks on me are going to be coming down the center line of my body and to my left. And using a left-handed grip has the weapon already on the side of my body that does most of the blocking. Secondly, this also puts my cutting edge, my attack, to the center line and right of my opponent, which is the farthest distance away from their shield. Remember, if I'm fighting a right-handed person, their shield is over here. So by being in a left-handed grip, I'm attacking their open side mostly. I've already got my weapon in point past the edge of the shield onto this side of their body. Virtually the only time that you will see me going into a right-handed grip is if I'm facing a left-handed opponent, or, here comes the big or. Everyone who fights with great weapon has a preferred offensive style. Now what I mean by that is everyone who uses a great weapon either favors cutting and chopping or favors point control, fencing, thrusting. Now sometimes it's dependent on the weapon, but other times it's just the person. I myself am much more comfortable fighting with cutting and chopping than I am with point control thrusting. Now that doesn't mean I don't use thrusting. Local guys will tell you that. I will absolutely make use of thrusting. But it's not my top priority most of the time. My top priority is maybe using the thrust to set up a cutting attack. Whereas there are some of my local fighters in particular that are very good, and I mean very good, with point control, thrusting, fencing, and so that is how they prefer to fight. Now I have found that for myself, when it comes to cutting and chopping, that I am much more accurate when I am doing it in the left-handed grip than in the right-handed grip. However, if I am doing point control, thrusting, and fencing, I am much better with that with a right-handed grip. I don't know if it's because when I first started out, when I used pike or spear, the 9-foot spear, that I did it all with a right-handed grip, and I just really developed my form style for thrusting, fencing with a right-handed grip, and therefore that is how I prefer to do thrusting and fencing. So if I go into a fight with somebody and I find that I want to switch or move from a aggressive cutting style into more of a fencing style, then I am going to switch hands and move over to the right. But to do that, I am certainly going to back as far out of range of my opponent as I possibly can so that they cannot attack me during that transition. If you see me fighting someone who does a lot, and we've all seen this, the flipping around. You get that guy that's just like, he's out there, he's just out of range, but he's flipping to the right-handed grip, he's flipping to the left-handed grip, he's kind of dropping into a thrust, and then he shifts up into a high guard, drops down into a thrust, and he flips his hands back and forth. And if you're watching me facing that kind of a person, and it doesn't matter if I'm facing them with a shield or if I'm facing them with a pole arm, you're going to see me doing one of two things. You're either going to see me just stand there and stare at them, because I'm waiting for them to get down to business, or I'm waiting and I'm timing what they're doing so that at that exact moment when they are starting to make that transition to go from one hand grip to another hand grip, so I can make a quick step in and make an attack and rush them. Because at the moment they're in transition, that's it. There's nothing they can really do to me other than run away. Okay? What you want to do is you want to get them in that mid-transition flip over. Now, as I said, we're talking here about Jackie Chan and Daffy Duck with that quarterstaff routine. And they're getting it in their head sometimes, the imagery of it, and they get caught up in the drama of it. And maybe they even think that by this bouncing around and this flipping back and forth, that they're maybe intimidating or confusing their opponent. And I got to tell you, anybody who's experienced at all against great weapon, they are not going to be intimidated at all, okay? And your chances of surprising them are pretty slim. The reality is you're taking yourself out of combat with this constant back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. There are only maybe 2 or 3 people that I have ever faced in nearly 40 years of fighting that can do that transition well enough, quick enough, with enough dexterity that I cannot gain an advantage on them by pressing them quickly. So my advice is stop fidgeting. Okay? Pick a grip, stick with it. Stay in your left hand, stay in your right-handed grip, whichever one you prefer for the style of combat that you prefer, whether it's cutting and chopping or whether it's point control thrusting. Pick it and stick with it. Stop flipping it around. Okay? I think you're going to find that you've invested so much of your own attention on this that you're losing your attention on your opponent. So my advice, stop. All right? Get your grip for your preferred attack form and stay there. If you decide at some point during the combat that you want to change tactics, that you want to move from cutting and chopping to thrusting or vice versa, get out of range of your opponent, make your switch, and then re-engage. Do not do it at, say, the range that I'm at right now with the camera. All right? Right now, my camera is about maybe 10 feet away from me. You would think that's out of range. For most great weapons, it really kind of is out of range. That is the only movement I need to get into range. 1 step. That's it. And if I can catch you in that mid-transition, you just gave up all of your offense to do the flip around. Don't do it. Stop the fidgeting, right? I feel kind of the same way about some of the bouncing and dancing and movement around somebody does when they're out here just on the edge of range. Again, most of the time, if you see me facing that type of a person that's doing all that bouncing and jumping around, I'm really just kind of standing there. Because until they commit to a forward movement, it doesn't really pay me to react. So you're really kind of using a lot of energy, and it's not really giving you a benefit. I'm not saying just stand there stoically like I'm talking about doing for myself, but have a plan of action. If you're going to do the bouncing around like that, make it a part of your advancing strategy. If you're going to be flipping your hands around, make it a conscious part of some type of strategy. But again, if in terms of intimidation factor, believe it, it's not going to be there. You're not going to intimidate anybody except somebody that's very inexperienced against great weapon. Against anybody that's got any experience at all against great weapon, they're not going to react to it maybe the way that you're anticipating. If you haven't had the kind of training that folks like Jackie Chan and Jet Li and some of the other really good martial artists have had, you're not going to gain an advantage by just flipping it around. So I hope that that explained in more depth and detail what I was getting into in my previous videos, and if any of this made any sense to you, great. Thanks a bunch.